Tommy Reeves, 6 years old, finds his mother's old flip phone in a drawer at 2 a.m. His stepfather, Dale, is drunk downstairs, and Tommy can hear glass breaking. The boy dials random numbers until someone answers. A gravel-voiced man named Hank Mercer, a 62-year-old ex-Marine who runs a motorcycle repair shop outside Salina, Kansas. Tommy whispers his address before the line goes dead. Hank debates for 20 minutes, then fires up his 81 Harley and rides into the night. When he arrives at the rundown farmhouse at 4:30 a.m., he finds Dale Brennan, a name Hank recognizes from the local papers, a man with 2 DUIs and a restraining order he violated. Hank makes one call to his riding club, the Iron Cross MC. By dawn, 300 bikes line the dirt road, their engines idling like thunder, and Dale Brennan realizes he's trapped. The phone rang at 2:14 a.m., and Hank Mercer almost didn't answer. When he did, all he heard was breathing, small, fast, terrified, and then a child's voice. "My name is Tommy and I need somebody to come get me." Hank Mercer's hands were black with grease when the phone started buzzing across the workbench. He'd been elbow-deep in a 79 Sportster transmission for the past 3 hours, trying to figure out why second gear kept grinding like a coffee mill. The shop smelled like old oil and the Folgers he'd burned an hour ago. Outside, Salina was dead quiet, the kind of 2 a.m. silence you only got in Kansas towns, where nothing stayed open past 9, except the truck stop off I-70. He wiped his hands on a rag that was already ruined and squinted at the screen. Unknown number. Probably a wrong number or some drunk looking for a tow. Hank let it ring twice more before picking up. "Yeah, nothing. Just breathing. Not heavy breathing like some pervert. This was shallow, quick. A kid's breathing." "Hello?" Hank said, his voice rougher than he meant it to be. 40 years of camels did that. "My name is Tommy." The voice was small, maybe 6 or 7 years old. "And I need somebody to come get me." Hank straightened up, the transmission forgotten. "Where are your parents, son?" "My mom's at work. She works nights at the hospital. It's just me and Dale here." "Who's Dale?" "My mom's boyfriend." The kid went quiet for a second. Hank heard something crash in the background, glass hitting a wall or a floor. "He's mad again." Hank felt his jaw tighten. He'd heard this story before. Hell, he'd lived a version of it when he was 8 years old, back in Oklahoma City, before his old man wrapped his truck around a telephone pole doing 90. "Where you at, Tommy?" The boy rattled off an address. 1847 County Road 14, just outside Bridgeport. Hank knew it, 45 minutes northeast, farm country, houses spread out like scattered teeth, not the kind of place where neighbors heard you scream. "Tommy, listen to me. You need to call 911. Tell them—" "I tried." The kid's voice cracked. "The phone won't let me. It's my mum's old one. It don't have service. I just kept pushing numbers until somebody answered." Another crash, closer this time. Then a man's voice, slurred and mean. "Who the hell you talking to?" The line went dead. Hank stood there, the phone still against his ear, listening to nothing. He set it down on the bench and stared at the Sportster like it might have an answer. It didn't. He could call the sheriff's office. Let them handle it. That's what a smart man would do. But Hank Mercer hadn't been accused of being smart in 30 years. He'd been called stubborn, reckless, and mean when he needed to be, never smart. The problem was, the Bridgeport Sheriff's Department had exactly 2 deputies on night shift, and Hank knew both of them. Carl Higgins was pushing 70 and spent most of his patrol time parked at the Sonic, eating tater tots. The other one, Amy Cho, was good people, but she was covering half the county by herself tonight. By the time she got to that farmhouse, something bad might already be done. Hank looked at his Harley, a 1981 FXE Super Glide, midnight blue with so many miles on it the odometer had rolled over twice. The bike leaked oil, the clutch slipped in 3rd gear, and the seat was held together with duct tape. But it ran, it always ran. He grabbed his leather jacket off the hook, worn thin at the elbows, Iron Cross MC patch on the back. The skull logo faded from years of sun and rain. His helmet was a half-shell, flat black, with a crack along the side from a low-side outside Dodge City in Euro 3. Didn't matter. Kansas didn't have a helmet law anyway. Hank fired up the shovelhead. The engine coughed once. then settled into that deep, uneven rumble that sounded like a heartbeat with arrhythmia. He let it warm up for 30 seconds, then kicked it into gear and rolled out of the shop into the October night. The air was cold, low 40s maybe, and it bit through his jeans and the thin t-shirt under his jacket. Hank didn't care. Cold kept you awake. Cold kept you sharp. He hit County Road 14 at 2:47 a.m., doing 70 on a road that was barely 2 lanes wide. No streetlights out here, just his headlight cutting a cone through the darkness, picking up fence posts and mailboxes and the occasional deer standing too close to the shoulder. The bike's engine was loud enough to wake everyone within a quarter mile, but there was nobody to wake, just empty fields and farmhouses set back from the road, their windows dark. At 3:11 a.m., Hank slowed down, checking mailbox numbers. 1843, 1845, then 1847, a rusted metal box hanging crooked on a post. He turned down the gravel driveway, killed his headlight, and let the bike coast the last 100 feet. The house was a single-story ranch with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. No lights on, except for a yellow glow coming from what looked like the kitchen. A Ford F-150 was parked in the dirt yard. Mid-90s model, primer gray, one taillight busted out. The kind of truck a man drove when he didn't give a damn about anything, including himself. Hank cut the engine and sat there in the silence, listening. He could hear a TV through the walls, some late-night infomercial selling cookware. Then a man's voice, loud and mean. "I said, get down here!" Hank swung off the bike and walked toward the house. His boots crunched on the gravel, and he didn't try to be quiet. He wanted whoever was inside to hear him coming. The porch steps groaned under Hank's weight. He knocked on the front door, not polite, not asking. 3 hard raps with his knuckles that said somebody better answer right now. The TV went quiet, footsteps inside, heavy and uneven. The door jerked open and Hank found himself looking at a man in his mid-30s, maybe 6 feet tall, wearing a stained undershirt and jeans with the belt unbuckled. His face was flushed, eyes glassy, beer gut pushing against the shirt. The smell of whiskey rolled out of the house like a fog. "The hell do you want?" the man said. "Dale Brennan," Hank assumed. "Got a call from a kid named Tommy," Hank said. His voice was flat, no threat in it yet. "Said he needed help." Dale's expression shifted, confusion, then anger. "Tommy? That little shit called you? Who the hell are you?" "Nobody important." Hank took a half-step forward, just enough to crowd the doorway. "Where is he?" "That's none of your goddamn business. This is my house, and that kid's got no right." "Where is he?" Dale's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. Then he stepped back, gesturing toward the hallway. "He's fine, probably hiding in his room like always. Kid's dramatic, always calling people, making up stories." Hank didn't move. "I want to see him." "I don't give a damn what you want." Dale's hand tightened on the doorframe. "You need to get off my property before I call the cops." "Go ahead and call them," Hank said. "I'll wait." They stood there, 2 men staring at each other across a threshold that smelled like stale beer and bad decisions. Hank had 6 inches of height on Dale and 20 pounds of muscle that hadn't gone soft yet. More importantly, he had 30 years of bar fights and Marine Corps training that taught him how to hurt people efficiently. Dale must have seen something in Hank's eyes, because he took another step back. "Look, man, I don't want trouble. The kid's fine. His mom just coddles him, makes him think every little thing is a crisis. He probably got scared because I raised my voice, that's it." "Then let me see him." Dale's face darkened. "You don't get to walk into my house and—" A small voice came from somewhere down the hall. "Hank?" Both men froze. The kid had heard his name. Hank felt something cold settle in his chest. "Tommy!" he called out. "Yeah!" The voice was closer now. A door creaked open. Then a boy appeared at the end of the hallway, skinny, dark hair sticking up in all directions, wearing Spider-Man pajamas that were too small for him. His left eye was puffy, the skin around it turning purple. Hank's hands clenched into fists. He looked at Dale. "You want to explain that?" "He fell," Dale said quickly. "Tripped over his toys. I told him to clean up his room, but he don't listen." "I didn't fall," Tommy said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. He pushed me into the table. "You little liar!" Dale started toward the kid, and Hank moved without thinking. He grabbed Dale's shoulder and shoved him back against the wall, hard enough to knock a picture frame loose. It hit the floor and shattered. "You don't move," Hank said quietly. "You don't talk. You just stand there and think about what happens next." Dale's eyes went wide, then narrowed. "You just assaulted me in my own house." "I'm pressing charges, you piece of—" Hank's forearm came up across Dale's throat, pinning him to the wall. Not hard enough to choke, but hard enough to shut him up. "Here's what's going to happen," Hank said. "I'm going to take Tommy outside. You're going to stay here. When his mother gets home, we'll have a conversation about what kind of man puts his hands on a 6-year-old. "He's not 6, Dale gasped. "He's 7 next month, and you can't just—" Hank pressed a little harder. Dale's face went red. "Do we understand each other?" Dale nodded, eyes bulging. Hank released him and stepped back. Dale slumped against the wall, coughing, one hand on his throat. Hank turned to Tommy. "You got shoes, son?" The boy nodded and disappeared back down the hall. He came back 30 seconds later wearing light-up sneakers and carrying a backpack shaped like a turtle. "That's everything?" Hank asked. "Yeah." "All right, let's go." They walked out together, Tommy's small hand tucked inside Hank's calloused one. Behind them, Dale was yelling something about lawyers and kidnapping, but Hank didn't turn around. He just kept walking until they reached the Harley. Tommy stared up at the bike. "Is that yours?" "Yeah, it's loud. Very loud. My mom says motorcycles are dangerous." "Your mom's right." Hank pulled a bandana out of his jacket pocket and tied it around the boy's face to keep the wind out of his mouth. "But right now, it's what we got." He swung his leg over the seat and pulled Tommy up in front of him, the kid's small body fitting in the V between Hank's arms and the handlebars. "Hold on to the tank right there. Don't let go." "Okay." Hank fired up the engine. Tommy flinched at the noise, but he didn't let go. The shovelhead's rumble filled the night, and Hank could see lights coming on in the house. Dale was probably calling someone right now. The cops, maybe his buddies. Didn't matter. They'd be gone before anyone showed up. He kicked the bike into gear and twisted the throttle. Gravel sprayed behind them as they roared down the driveway, and by the time they hit County Road 14, Dale Brennan's house was just a yellow square of light, shrinking in the distance. Tommy was shaking. Hank could feel it through the kid's back, pressed against his chest. Not from the cold, from everything else. "You did good," Hank said, loud enough to be heard over the engine. "Calling somebody. That took guts." Tommy didn't say anything, but his grip on the tank tightened. Hank rode for 10 minutes before pulling over at a closed gas station. He needed to make a call, and he needed to think. The nearest hospital was in Salina, 40 minutes away. But if he took Tommy there, Child Protective Services would get involved. The kid would end up in the system, bounced between foster homes, while his mother tried to navigate a legal nightmare. Hank had seen it happen before. The system was designed to help, but sometimes it just made things worse. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 6 months. It rang 4 times before a woman answered, her voice thick with sleep. "This better be good, Mercer." "Hey, Rita, I need a favor." Rita Wolf lived in a double-wide trailer on the south side of Salina, surrounded by juniper bushes and a chain-link fence that kept her 3 rescue dogs from wandering into traffic. She opened the door at 4:02 a.m. wearing a bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, her grey hair pulled back in a braid. Her eyes went from Hank to the kid standing beside him, and she didn't ask questions. That's why Hank had called her. "He needs looking at," Hank said. "Black eye, maybe some bruising on his ribs. I didn't check." Rita stepped aside. "Bring him in." Inside, the trailer smelled like lavender and dog food. 2 mutts, some kind of terrier mix, barked from a back bedroom, but Rita shushed them with a sharp word. Tommy stood in the middle of the small living room, his turtle backpack still on, looking around like he wasn't sure if this was safe yet. "What's your name, honey?" Rita asked, kneeling down to his level. "Tommy Reeves." "I'm Rita. I used to be a nurse before I retired. Mind if I take a look at that eye?" Tommy glanced at Hank, who nodded. The kid let Rita guide him to the couch and sat down. She clicked on a lamp and tilted his face toward the light, her fingers gentle but professional. Hank stood by the door, arms crossed, watching. "How'd this happen, Tommy?" Rita asked. "Dale hit me." "Who's Dale?" "My mum's boyfriend." Rita looked over at Hank, her expression unreadable. Then she turned back to Tommy. "Does your mum know?" "She's at work. She works at the hospital. She's a janitor." "Which hospital?" "County General, in Salina." Rita kept examining the boy, checking his arms, his neck, the way he moved when she asked him to lift his shirt. There were bruises on his ribs, purple and yellow, at different stages of healing. This wasn't the first time. "All right," Rita said softly. "You're going to be okay. Nothing's broken. But we need to call your mom. Let her know where you are." Tommy's eyes went wide. "Is Dale gonna come here?" "No," Hank said from the doorway. "He's not." Rita stood up and walked over to Hank, her voice low. "What the hell did you do?" "Nothing he didn't have coming." "That's not an answer." "I took the kid out of a bad situation." "That's the answer." Rita studied him for a long moment. They'd known each other for 15 years, ever since Hank's riding club had raised money for the animal shelter she volunteered at. She'd patched up more than a few bikers over the years. No questions asked, no judgments made. But there were lines even Rita didn't like crossing. If that man calls the cops, then they'll show up and see a drunk with a history of violence and a kid with bruises. Let them sort it out. Rita sighed. "You should have called Child Services." "I did what needed doing." She shook her head but didn't argue. Instead, she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling County General. We need to find his mother." While Rita made the call, Hank sat down in a recliner across from Tommy. The kid was staring at the wall, his hands folded in his lap, like he was waiting for permission to exist. "You hungry?" Hank asked. Tommy shook his head. "When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday, at school." Hank got up and went to the kitchen, where he found a box of Cheerios and some milk that smelled okay. He poured a bowl and brought it back to Tommy. The kid took it but didn't eat, just held the spoon like he'd forgotten what it was for. "Your mom love you?" Hank asked. Tommy nodded. "Then she's gonna fix this. But you got to tell her what's been happening, all of it, not just tonight. What if she doesn't believe me? She'll believe you." Hank leaned back in the chair. "You know how I know, because you're the one who called for help. Kids don't do that unless something's really wrong. Your mom will figure that out." Tommy finally took a bite of cereal, then another. Hank watched him eat and thought about his own kid, a daughter he hadn't seen in 12 years, somewhere in Arizona with her mother and a stepdad who probably treated her better than Hank ever could have. He'd made peace with that a long time ago. Some men weren't built for fatherhood. But that didn't mean they couldn't do something useful when it mattered. Rita came back into the room, her face tight. "I got her. She's leaving work now. Should be here in 20 minutes. "Good. There's something else." Rita glanced at Tommy, then back at Hank. "When I called the hospital, they said someone else had been looking for Tommy's mom about an hour ago. A man matching Dale's description." Hank felt his jaw tighten. He say what he wanted. "Told the receptionist there was a family emergency. They didn't give him any information, but he was angry when he left. He's looking for the kid, probably." Hank stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. The street outside was empty, just a row of trailers and a few streetlights. But that could change fast. Dale knew Tommy's mom worked at the hospital. If he was smart, or desperate enough, he might stake out the place, follow her when she left. Hank pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. He stopped on a name, Crank Wilson, president of the Iron Cross MC. They'd ridden together since '98 through good times and bad. If Hank was calling at 4:30 in the morning, Crank would know it was serious. The phone rang twice. "Mercer, what's wrong?" "I need the club." "How many?" "All of them." There was a pause. "What are we doing?" "Making sure a piece of shit understands he's done putting his hands on a kid." Another pause. Longer this time, then, "Where?" Hank gave him the address to Rita's trailer. "And Crank? We're not starting anything. We're just making a point." "Understood. We'll be there by dawn." Hank hung up and turned back to Rita. "You might want to make some coffee." "How many are coming?" "Enough." By 5:15 a.m. the first bikes started arriving. They came in pairs, then groups of 5, then 10. The rumble of Harley engines filled the early morning air, and soon Rita's quiet street was lined with motorcycles, diners and soft ales, and old shovelheads like Hanks, men in leather vests with the iron cross patch on the back. Some were in their 60s, grey-haired and scarred from decades of riding. Others were younger, but they all had the same look, men who'd been to the edge and come back with fewer illusions about how the world worked. Crank Wilson pulled up at 5:45 a.m. on a blacked-out Road King. He was 63, barrel-chested, with a beard down to his sternum and tattoos crawling up both arms. He walked over to where Hank was standing and didn't say a word, just looked at the trailer, then back at Hank. "Kid's inside," Hank said. "Stepfather's been using him as a punching bag. I pulled him out a few hours ago. The guy might show up looking for him." Crank nodded slowly. "What do you want us to do?" "Nothing violent. We just need to make sure he understands the consequences if he ever touches that boy again." "And if he doesn't understand?" Hank met his eyes. "Then we make it clear." By 6 a.m., there were over 300 motorcycles lining the street, parked 2 deep along both sides. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The sound of all those idling engines was like a physical thing, a low rumble that you felt in your chest more than heard. Tommy came out onto the porch, his mother beside him. She was young, maybe 30, with dark circles under her eyes and hospital scrubs still on. Her name was Angela, and she'd been crying since she got there. Now she stood with one hand on her son's shoulder, staring at the sea of motorcycles and the men standing beside them. "I don't understand," she said to Hank. "Why are they here?" "Because Tommy needed help," Hank said. "And when somebody needs help, you don't show up alone." Dale Brennan's Ford F-150 turned onto Rita's street at 6:47 a.m., the sunrise glinting off the cracked windshield. He was halfway down the block before he saw them, a wall of motorcycles and leather-clad men stretching from one end of the street to the other. He slowed down, his foot hovering between the gas and the brake, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. There had to be 300 bikes, maybe more. They lined both sides of the street, parked at angles, chrome gleaming in the early light. And standing beside each motorcycle was a man. Some had their arms crossed. Others just stood there, watching, waiting. Dale's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He could see the trailer now, Rita's double-wide with the chain-link fence. And standing on the porch was Angela, her arm around Tommy. And beside them, that old bastard from last night, the one who'd put his hands on Dale in his own house. Dale rolled down his window. "Angela!" he shouted. "Get in the truck!" She didn't move, just stood there looking at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "I said get in the damn truck. You and the boy, we're going home." One of the bikers, a big man with a grey beard and a road captain patch on his vest, walked into the middle of the street and held up his hand. Dale hit the brakes, the truck jerking to a stop 20 feet away. The big man walked up to the driver's side window. Up close, Dale could see the tattoos on his knuckles, the scar running through his left eyebrow. The man leaned down, his forearms resting on the doorframe. "You Dale Brennan?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "Who the hell are you?" "Name's Crank Wilson. I'm the president of the Iron Cross Motorcycle Club. And these are my brothers." He gestured to the men behind him. "We heard you got a problem with putting your hands on children." Dale's face went red. "That's none of your business. That's between me and my family." "See? That's where you're wrong." Crank straightened up and took a step back. "When a 6-year-old boy has to dial random phone numbers at 2 in the morning because he's scared for his life, that becomes everybody's business." "He's lying. Kids lie all the time. Ask anyone. Tommy makes up stories, he's dramatic, He's got a black eye," Crank said, "and bruises on his ribs from different days." "You want to explain that?" Dale's jaw worked. "He falls, he's clumsy. Boys that age are always getting banged up." Crank nodded slowly. Then he turned and looked back at the sea of motorcycles. "Anybody here got kids?" About half the men raised their hands. "Anybody's kid ever get a black eye from falling?" Nobody raised their hand. Crank turned back to Dale. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn this truck around and drive away. You're not going to contact Angela. You're not going to go near Tommy. You're not going to send your friends or your family or anybody else. You're just going to disappear from their lives like you never existed. You can't tell me what to do, Dale said, but his voice had lost its edge. I live with Angela. That's my house. Actually, Hank called from the porch, it's her house. The lease is in her name. I checked with the landlord this morning. You're just crashing there, and as of right now, you're evicted. Dale's eyes darted between Hank and Crank and the hundreds of men standing silent behind them. This is harassment. I'm calling the cops. Go ahead, Crank said. He pulled out his own phone and held it up. I'll call them for you. We can explain how you assaulted a minor, violated your restraining order from your last girlfriend, and drove here this morning to intimidate a woman and child. I'm sure Sheriff Dobbs would love to hear about it. You remember Sheriff Dobbs, right? The one who arrested you for your second DUI? Dale's face went pale. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel now. Crank leaned in close, his voice dropping to something cold and final. Or you can just leave, get in your truck, drive out of town, and never look back, because if you don't, if you so much as drive past Angela's house or show up at Tommy's school or send her a text message, we'll know. And next time, there won't be a conversation. Dale stared at him for a long moment. Then he shifted the truck into reverse and backed down the street, his tires squealing as he turned around. The F-150 fishtailed once, then straightened out and disappeared around the corner, the engine roaring as he sped away. The silence that followed was broken only by the idle of 300 motorcycles. Then, one by one, the engines shut off. The men stayed where they were, watching the empty street, making sure Dale didn't come back. Crank walked over to the porch. He looked at Angela, then at Tommy. He won't bother you again, Mom. You got my word on that. Angela's voice was shaky. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Crank pulled a business card out of his wallet and handed it to her. You need anything. A lock changed, a security system installed, somebody to walk you to your car at night. You call that number, day or night. We'll be there. Angela took the card with trembling fingers. Thank you. Crank nodded, then looked at Hank. You good? Yeah. Thanks for coming out. That's what brothers do. Crank turned and walked back to his bike. One by one, the other men did the same. Engines fired up, that familiar rumble filling the air again. They pulled out in groups, heading off in different directions, until the street was empty, except for Hank's shovelhead, and Rita standing in her doorway with a cup of coffee. Tommy's mother sat at Rita's kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she hadn't touched. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the window and lighting up the dust motes floating in the air. Tommy was in the living room, asleep on the couch with one of Rita's dogs curled up at his feet. I should have seen it, Angela said quietly. The bruises, the way he'd flinch when Dale raised his voice, I thought. I told myself it was just an adjustment. Dale moved in 6 months ago, and I thought Tommy just needed time to get used to him. Hank sat across from her, his hands flat on the table. He didn't say anything. Sometimes people just needed to talk. I work nights, Angela continued. 10-hour shifts, 4 nights a week. Dale said he'd watch Tommy help out around the house. I thought it was good for Tommy to have a man around. His real dad left when he was 2, never came back. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I picked another winner, didn't I? You didn't know, Hank said. I should have. Nobody sees it until it's too late. That's how men like Dale work. They're charming at first, helpful. Then they start finding reasons to be angry, and when they run out of reasons, they just make them up. Angela looked up at him. How do you know so much about it? Because I grew up with a man like that, and I swore I'd never be him. Hank paused. I didn't always keep that promise, but I try. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, Rita was sweeping the porch, the bristles scratching against the wood. A car drove by, slowing down to look at the tire marks Dale's truck had left on the pavement. What do I do now? Angela asked. Dale knows where I work, where Tommy goes to school. What if he comes back? He won't. How can you be sure? Because 300 men just told him what happens if he does. And Dale's not stupid. He's a coward who picks on people smaller than him. But he's not stupid. Angela nodded. but she didn't look convinced. Hank understood. Fear didn't go away just because someone told you it was over. It lingered. It made you check your locks twice and look over your shoulder in parking lots. You need to file a police report, Hank said. Get everything on record. Then you need a restraining order. I know a lawyer in town who does family law. She's good. I'll give you her number. I can't afford a lawyer. She'll work with you. Tell her I sent you. Angela finally took a sip of her coffee. It had gone cold, but she didn't seem to notice. Why are you doing this? You don't even know us. Your kid called me. That means something. He called a random number. You could have ignored it. Could have, Hank said. Didn't. Rita came back inside, the broom propped against the wall. I called the hospital, told them Angela had a family emergency and wouldn't be in tonight. They're covered. Thank you, Angela said. You're staying here today, Rita said firmly. Both of you, get some rest. We'll figure out next steps when you're thinking clearly. Angela looked like she wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She just nodded and stood up, walking to the living room to check on Tommy. The boy was still asleep, his face peaceful for the first time since Hank had met him. Hank stood up and stretched. His back ached from the ride and the lack of sleep. He was 58 years old and hadn't pulled an all-nighter in a decade. He could feel every one of those years now. Rita walked him to the door. You did a good thing, Mercer. Just did what needed doing. Most people wouldn't have. Hank shrugged. He didn't know how to respond to that. He'd never been good at accepting gratitude. You need anything? Rita asked. And sleep, about 12 hours of it. She smiled. Go home. I'll call you if anything changes. Hank walked out to his bike and swung his leg over the seat. The shovel head started on the first kick, that familiar rumble settling into his bones. He sat there for a moment, looking back at the trailer. Through the window, he could see Angela sitting on the couch next to Tommy, her arm around him. He thought about his own daughter again, wondered if she ever needed someone to show up for her the way he'd shown up for Tommy, wondered if someone had. Then he twisted the throttle and pulled away, heading back toward his shop and the Sportster transmission that was still waiting on his workbench. 3 weeks later, Hank was under a 72 panhead when his phone buzzed. He ignored it. Whatever it was could wait until he got this oil line reattached, but then it buzzed again and again. He rolled out from under the bike and checked the screen. Text messages from Crank. Turn on the news, Channel 7. Hank wiped his hands and walked over to the small TV he kept on a shelf in the corner. It was tuned to a Royals game from last week. He flipped to Channel 7 and saw a reporter standing outside the Salina courthouse. In what officials are calling an unprecedented show of community support, Dale Brennan was arrested this morning on charges of child endangerment and assault. The arrest came after Angela Reeves filed a restraining order 3 weeks ago, and an investigation revealed a pattern of abuse dating back several months. The camera cut to footage of Dale being led out of a house in handcuffs, his face red and twisted with anger. Behind him, Hank could see at least 50 motorcycles parked along the street, their riders standing silent with their arms crossed. The reporter continued. Local motorcycle clubs, including the Iron Cross MC, have been providing security for Ms. Reeves and her son since the incident. Club president Hank Wilson, Crank Wilson, Hank muttered at the TV, stated that they will continue to monitor the situation to ensure the family's safety. Brennan is being held on $50,000 bond and is scheduled for arraignment next week. The segment ended, and the news switched to a story about road construction on I-70. Hank turned off the TV and stared at the blank screen. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call, unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello? Mr. Mercer? A small voice, familiar. Tommy? Yeah, my mom said I could call you. I wanted to say thank you. Hank sat down on his workbench stool. You don't need to thank me, son. But I do. You came when I called. Nobody ever does that. Well, that's on them, not you. There was a pause, then, are you going to come visit us? Hank hadn't thought about that. He'd been so focused on getting the kids safe that he hadn't considered what came after. You want me to? Yeah. Mom's making spaghetti on Sunday. She said you could come over if you want. Hank looked around his shop. The oil-stained floor, the half-assembled bikes, the Folgers can with 3 inches of cold coffee at the bottom. This place had been his whole world for 30 years. Work, ride, sleep, repeat. But maybe that didn't have to be everything. "What time's dinner?" he asked. 6 o'clock. I'll be there." "Okay." "Bye, Hank." "Bye, Tommy." The line went dead. Hank sat there for a moment, then put his phone down and rolled back under the panhead. He had work to do. But Sunday he'd take a shower, put on a clean shirt, and show up at a single mother's house for spaghetti dinner with a kid who'd dialed a random number and changed both their lives. Outside, the Kansas wind rattled the shop door. Somewhere in town, 300 motorcycles sat in garages and driveways, waiting for the next call. Because that's what brothers did. They showed up, and sometimes that was enough.